For centuries, the human race had lived under the shadow of alien overlords. Earth, once a flourishing cradle of civilization, had fallen to invaders from beyond the stars. These aliens were powerful, technologically advanced, and ruthless. The world they had conquered was reduced to rubble, with cities turned into prisons and humanity enslaved, struggling for survival in a world that no longer felt like their own. The sun shone over a planet that had lost its spark, its history, and its hope. Mankind was no longer the dominant species. It was a mere tool, serving the whims of its extraterrestrial captors. The aliens were relentless. They had come with superior weapons and technology that humanity could not even begin to comprehend. They controlled everything, every aspect of life, every breath of air, and every moment of time. Humans were kept in line, bound by chains of fear and oppression. Any resistance was swiftly crushed. Any attempt to fight back, snuffed out. It seemed as though the earth had been consigned to a future of servitude with no way out. But even in the darkest corners of the world, a spark remained, a tiny flicker of hope that refused to die. The humans had been beaten down, their spirit shattered by years of captivity. They lived in the ruins of their former cities, huddling together in small groups, whispering of a time before the invasion. Their lives were marked by hardship, but even in the bleakest of conditions, they never lost the one thing that made them truly human: resilience. The alien invaders, despite their overwhelming power, had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. In secret, underground movements began to rise. These humans, unnoticed by their alien captors, trained in the shadows, learning to use the scraps of technology left behind by their conquerors. The humans were resourceful, innovative, and determined. They fought, not just with weapons, but with their minds. They studied the alien technology, reverse engineering it piece by piece. It was no longer just a matter of survival. It was a matter of reclaiming what was theirs. The aliens, in their arrogance, believed their hold on Earth was unbreakable. They thought humans were nothing more than an inferior species, incapable of defying them. They treated the humans as mere tools, machines to serve their will. But they didn't know the power that lay dormant within the human race. They didn't know that the chains they had forged to control the Earth would one day be shattered by the very hands they had enslaved. The humans began to fight back, using the very technology that had been imposed upon them. Small victories were won, at first. A few captured alien soldiers, a few sabotaged supply lines. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show the aliens that their control wasn't as absolute as they thought. The fire of rebellion spread like wildfire, and soon the human resistance was a force to be reckoned with. But the aliens were not blind to this uprising. They retaliated with brutal force, reinforcing their power with more troops, more weapons, and more oppression. They believed that the humans would eventually submit, that they would realize the futility of their struggle. But they didn't understand humanity. They didn't understand the power of the human will, the drive to fight for freedom, for the right to exist on their own terms. In the face of alien oppression, humanity's resolve only strengthened. The humans, once broken and subjugated, were now rising. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their future. And in the deepest recesses of their hearts, they knew that they would stop at nothing to break the chains that bound them. The story was about to take a turn. The humans had discovered something, the one thing that could truly tip the scales in their favor. A powerful weapon, a force that the aliens had long kept hidden, a secret buried deep within their control. This weapon, A force that could turn the tide of the war was their last hope. The humans knew that this was their moment, the tipping point, but to harness it, they would have to infiltrate the heart of the alien empire to strike at the very core of their enemy's power. The resistance, now emboldened, made its move. The humans, in their ragtag groups, fought their way toward the alien stronghold. They knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, that many would fall along the way. But the taste of freedom was sweet, and it drove them forward with an unrelenting force. The aliens, finally realizing the threat posed by the humans, began to close in, trying to crush the resistance once and for all. The humans fought with everything they had, determined to take back their world. With every battle, with every struggle, the humans began to see the truth. The aliens were powerful, yes, but they were not invincible. They were not gods. They were conquerors, but they had no idea how to defeat the indomitable spirit of humanity. And now, with the weapon within their grasp, the humans were about to strike back in a way the aliens never saw coming. But the battle was far from over. The stakes were higher than ever, and the tension was thick in the air. The humans were closer to their goal than ever, but they knew that one wrong move could spell disaster. The alien overlords would stop at nothing to maintain their control, and the humans knew they were running out of time. The war was building to a climax. Would the humans be able to break the chains that bound them, or would the aliens prove that their hold on Earth was truly unbreakable? The answer, however, was not simple. As the final confrontation loomed on the horizon, both sides knew that the outcome would change everything for better or worse. The story of Earth's resistance was far from over, and with each passing moment, the future of humanity hung in the balance. The humans had been oppressed for far too long. They had already proven that they were capable of so much more than the aliens had ever imagined. But the road ahead was uncertain, and the tension was unbearable. And now, as the first shots of the final battle rang out across the planet, humanity was about to face its greatest test. Would they break the chains and reclaim their world, or would they fall, forever enslaved by their alien masters? The war for Earth was about to begin in earnest, and the humans were ready to fight, not just for survival, but for victory. As the days turned into years under alien rule, the humans had become accustomed to their oppression. They had lived under the suffocating weight of the aliens' control for so long that it had become their only reality. Their homes, their cities, everything they once knew had been reduced to mere husks of their former selves. The sky, once vibrant with the promise of a bright future, now appeared dull and clouded, a reflection of the hopelessness that had taken root in the hearts of mankind. In the early days of the invasion, resistance groups had formed, but they were weak, disorganized, and easily crushed by the alien forces. The alien invaders, with their overwhelming technology and advanced weaponry, had left little room for rebellion. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, there were still whispers in the darkest corners of the world. Whispers of a rebellion that would one day rise again. Quiet hope that refused to die, even as the chains tightened around humanity's neck. One such group of rebels had become the heart of this silent uprising. They were led by a small but determined band of survivors who had managed to escape the initial onslaught of the alien forces. They had taken refuge in the forgotten ruins of cities, living in the shadows, moving in secrecy. They didn't have much, just the bare essentials needed to survive. But they had something that the aliens could never take from them, a burning desire to fight for freedom, to reclaim the world that had once been theirs. The leader of this ragtag group was a person of immense determination, someone who had lost everything but was unwilling to surrender to the alien masters. This leader, known only to their followers as the General, was a symbol of hope in a world that had nearly forgotten what it was to be free. Their leadership was subtle but effective, drawing people to their cause with a quiet strength. The general was not interested in grand speeches or elaborate plans. Instead, they focused on the small victories, the little wins that added up over time. Sabotaging alien supply lines, striking at their communication networks, rescuing prisoners from alien labor camps, these were the actions that kept the fire of resistance alive. Despite their best efforts, the rebels faced constant setbacks. The alien overlords were not unaware of the growing unrest. They had eyes everywhere, their surveillance systems and drones constantly watching the humans, waiting for them to make a move. The aliens had studied humanity for years, and they had become experts in suppressing any uprising before it could gather momentum. But the humans were no longer the broken, defeated species they had been when the invasion began. They had adapted, they had learned. The human spirit, though battered, had not been broken. The rebels had found a way to communicate across the alien-controlled lines, using encrypted messages to rally more people to their cause. The more they fought, the more people began to believe that victory was possible. Each small success was a victory in itself, a step closer to breaking the alien chains. As the resistance grew, so too did the alien response. The alien commanders were ruthless, their patience wearing thin. They dispatched more troops to maintain their grip on Earth, increasing the surveillance and punishment for anyone suspected of aiding the rebels. The invaders believed that fear was the best way to keep the humans in check. They used public executions, mass imprisonments, and scorched earth tactics to crush any hope before it could take root. But there was one thing the aliens never anticipated: the ingenuity of the human mind. In the dark corners of the world, where the aliens couldn't see, humans worked tirelessly to develop new weapons, new strategies, and new ways to strike back. The rebels had started to use alien technology against the invaders, turning the very tools that had been used to enslave them into instruments of their liberation. They hacked into the alien systems, sabotaged their machines, and learned how to fight back on their own terms. Still, the struggle was far from easy. The aliens had superior firepower, and their knowledge of human weaknesses gave them an edge. Yet, the rebels' unity, their resolve, and their belief in the possibility of a free world kept them going. Each member of the resistance had their own reasons for fighting. Some had lost families to the alien invaders, others had seen their homes destroyed. For some, the cause was personal, a deep-rooted hatred for the aliens who had taken everything from them. But all of them shared one common goal: to take back their world and put an end to the alien occupation once and for all. As the months passed, the tension in the air thickened. The human resistance had grown bold, striking at alien targets more frequently, causing disruption and chaos. The aliens, once certain of their victory, began to feel the pressure. They had never faced an enemy like this before. Humanity's will to fight, to survive, seemed limitless. But the aliens were not about to give up without a fight. They began to tighten their grip, increasing their control over every aspect of life. The rebellion, for all its victories, had not yet reached the tipping point. One day, as the resistance was preparing for their next strike, they uncovered a shocking discovery. Hidden deep within the alien command center, they found something that could change everything: a weapon, one unlike any the aliens had used before. It was a device capable of disrupting the very fabric of the alien control systems, a weapon that could turn the tide of the war. But the weapon was not easy to reach. It was locked away, guarded by layers of alien technology and defenses. To get to it, the rebels would have to infiltrate the heart of the alien empire, risking everything for the chance to strike a devastating blow against their captors. This discovery set the stage for the most dangerous mission the Resistance had ever undertaken. The stakes had never been higher. If they could obtain the weapon, they might be able to break the aliens' hold on Earth and give humanity a fighting chance. But if they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. The aliens would strike back with a vengeance, wiping out the remaining pockets of resistance and solidifying their control over the planet forever. The tension was palpable. The general and their team knew that the risks were immense, but the promise of freedom was worth the danger. As they prepared for the most daring operation of their lives, they had no way of knowing what awaited them inside the alien stronghold. But one thing was certain: humanity's fight for freedom had reached its breaking point, and the battle for Earth's future was about to explode into a confrontation that would decide the fate of the entire world. The rebels, though filled with fear and uncertainty, knew they had no choice. The weapon was their only hope. It was now or never. With the aliens closing in and the fate of their world hanging by a thread, they had to act or risk losing everything. As they set out on their mission, they carried with them the weight of the entire human race's hopes and dreams, knowing that this one act might be the key to breaking the chains that had bound them for so long. The days leading up to the mission were filled with a quiet intensity. The rebels, though usually used to operating in the shadows, now moved with an even greater sense of purpose. The stakes had never been higher. They were no longer fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for humanity's future, for the freedom of everyone who had been enslaved by the aliens. The hope of a better world rested on their shoulders, and the weight of that responsibility was both a heavy burden and a burning source of motivation. Preparations were meticulous. Every detail was scrutinized, every plan discussed and then revised. The rebels had spent years gathering intel, learning the ins and outs of the alien strongholds, and now it was time to put everything they had learned to the test. But even with all their preparation, there were no guarantees. They had faced failure before, and the aliens had grown more ruthless with every setback. The general, who had led them through countless missions, wasn't sure if they were ready for this. The weapon they were after was locked deep within the alien fortress, guarded by layers of security they hadn't fully understood. Getting past those defenses would be nearly impossible, but they had no choice. Failure wasn't an option. As the time to move in drew nearer, the tension within the rebel camp was palpable. Each member of the team knew what was at stake. The silence was broken only by whispered conversations, the sound of weapons being checked and rechecked, and the occasional thud of boots on the hard ground. There was a sense of unity among the rebels, an unspoken bond that tied them together. They all knew the risks, and they all understood the sacrifices that had brought them to this point. They were ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead because they had no other choice. The night before the mission, the general called a final meeting. It wasn't a long one. There were no speeches, no promises of glory, just a final reminder of the importance of the task at hand. The rebels listened in silence, each one steeling themselves for what was to come. They knew they would likely face insurmountable odds, but they also knew that this was the only chance they would get. The weapon they sought could change everything, and the aliens could not be allowed to keep it. As they left the meeting, the air was thick with the unspoken knowledge that they were embarking on a mission from which they might not return. Some of them had families, others had friends they'd lost along the way. Every face, every gaze seemed to carry the same determination, a determination born of years of suffering, of watching their world fall under alien rule. The mission was no longer just about taking down the aliens. It was about restoring the dignity of their race. It was about proving that humanity could not be enslaved forever. Under the cover of darkness, the rebels made their way to the alien stronghold. They moved swiftly, their movements choreographed, honed by years of practice. The perimeter was heavily guarded, but the rebels had studied the defenses and found a weak spot, an old, rusted access point that the aliens had overlooked in their arrogance. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The rebels slipped through the crack in the alien security, entering the fortress unnoticed. The facility they had entered was massive, its walls alive with the hum of alien technology. The air smelled sterile, metallic, and foreign. Every corner seemed to hold a hidden danger. The rebels moved silently, their footsteps light but deliberate. They knew that if they were discovered, they wouldn't have much time before the aliens responded. The clock was ticking, and every moment brought them closer to either victory or death. They navigated through the winding corridors, their eyes scanning the darkened hallways for any signs of movement. The facility was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made their hearts pound in their chests. The further they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The alien technology seemed to pulse around them, as if it were aware of their presence, watching, waiting. But they pressed on, undeterred. They had come too far to turn back now. After what seemed like an eternity, the door loomed before them, a massive, imposing structure that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The general signaled for everyone to stop. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. They had reached the heart of the alien empire, and the weapon that could break their chains was within their grasp. But as they prepared to breach the door, something unexpected happened. A soft, mechanical hum filled the air, followed by a series of flashing red lights. The rebels froze, their breath catching in their throats. They had been spotted. Somehow, the aliens had detected their presence. The general cursed under their breath. The weapon was just beyond that door, but now they had no choice but to fight their way through. There was no turning back now. They had come this far, and they would either succeed or die trying. The team quickly took up defensive positions, their weapons aimed at the door, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. The door shuddered as it began to open, revealing a small chamber beyond. Standing in the center of the room was an alien figure, tall, imposing, and covered in gleaming armor. It was unlike any alien they had encountered before. This was no ordinary soldier. This was something far more dangerous. The general's heart raced as they looked at the alien, their minds scrambling for a plan. They knew they were outmatched, but they also knew that the stakes had never been higher. If they failed here, humanity's last hope would be lost. But before the first shot could be fired, the alien spoke in a deep, resonating voice. "You think you can defeat us? You are but insects. Your kind is weak." The words sent a chill through the rebels, but the general stood firm. "We're not insects," they said, their voice steady, "and you'll learn that the hard way." The alien's eyes glowed with a sinister light. "So be it. Prepare to face the consequences of your rebellion." The tension in the room was unbearable, the air thick with the anticipation of battle. The rebels knew that everything they had fought for was about to come to a head. Their next move could mean the difference between victory and destruction. And in that moment, as they prepared to face the unknown, all they could do was hold their ground and hope they were ready for what was to come. As the aliens' chilling words hung in the air, the rebels braced themselves, eyes flicking toward the general for any signal. They were prepared for a fight familiar with the alien threat, accustomed to the sacrifices that war demanded. The tension was unbearable, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. The alien's stance was poised, powerful, as though it had no doubt in its mind that the rebels were insignificant. Then, without warning, the air shimmered. A strange hum reverberated through the room, low and vibrating with an energy that made the rebels' skin tingle. The alien's form began to warp, shifting in an unnatural, fluid way. The general's heart skipped a beat as the alien's towering, imposing figure melted into something altogether different, smaller but still menacing. The transformation was shocking. It wasn't just a change in physical form, it was a shift in purpose, in essence. The alien before them was no longer just a soldier. It was something far more dangerous. It was a leader. A high-ranking figure, perhaps even the commander of the entire operation. The alien's armor clanged to the floor with a metallic sound that echoed through the chamber, revealing its true alien physiology: sleek, armored limbs with glowing veins running beneath its surface, eyes swirling with dark energy, and a presence that demanded respect. But that wasn't the only revelation. The general's eyes narrowed as they realized what was happening. They had walked into a trap. The entire mission had been anticipated. There had been no infiltration, no sneaking by the enemy undetected. The alien forces had known about their movements long before they breached the stronghold. This was a deeper game, a much more intricate plot than they had understood. The general's pulse quickened, adrenaline flooding their system. They were not facing just a military force, they were facing the very heart of an empire. A network that had been watching, waiting for this moment to finally strike. And now, it was clear, this mission wasn't just about freeing humanity from oppression. It was about breaking an ancient cycle. It was about taking down a force far beyond what they had imagined. The alien leader, its shape shifting even further, took a step forward, its voice now more chilling than before. "You think you understand what you're up against? You think this rebellion was something born from your courage and defiance? No, it is something I have orchestrated. All of it. From the beginning." A cold realization washed over the rebels. Everything they thought they knew, their fight for freedom, their strategies, their tactics had been manipulated from the shadows. The entire rebellion had been playing into the hands of the alien forces, moving in ways that suited their adversaries' plans. The alien leader wasn't just some pawn, but a master strategist, one who had anticipated every move they would make, every step they would take. The general's mind raced. How had they been so blind? Had they been under surveillance this whole time? Had their rebellion been set in motion only for it to be used as a tool for a much larger conquest? They had underestimated the aliens' power, their intellect. This was no simple battle for freedom. The forces they were up against were far more organized, far more prepared than they had ever realized. The room felt colder. The walls themselves seemed to close in on them as the aliens' presence became even more overwhelming. "You are not the first humans to think they could defeat us. And you won't be the last. But your rebellion will end here. You'll all fall in the same way the others did, thinking you were free, only to be slaves to the grand plan we've already set into motion." As the alien spoke, The rebels exchanged looks. They were not sure what to believe anymore. The hope that had kept them going for so long, the belief that they were fighting for a better world, now seemed to be slipping away like sand through their fingers. How could they fight back against an enemy that already knew their every move, their every weakness? The aliens' words rang in their ears, sinking into their minds. The general's thoughts spun out of control. There were no guarantees now. The carefully laid plans had been compromised, and they were up against an enemy that was playing a far deeper game. Every ounce of preparation, every bit of hope seemed meaningless in the face of this new reality. And yet, somewhere deep inside, the general's resolve hardened. They had no choice but to keep going, to push forward despite the overwhelming odds. There was still the weapon they had come for, the key to humanity's survival. It was close. They could feel its power, its potential to shift the course of the entire rebellion. But as the alien leader's mocking laugh reverberated through the room, a chilling thought crossed their mind. What if the weapon they sought was not the key to victory at all? What if it was a tool designed to weaken them even more, to trap them into the aliens' hands forever? The general couldn't afford to make another mistake. The alien's voice broke through their thoughts once more. Do you still think you can stop us? Do you still believe your rebellion is a spark of hope? You are but a shadow of the true power we command. We don't need to enslave you. You'll come to us willingly, just like the others. And then, a shift in the air, a disruption. The chamber trembled, and the walls began to glow with an ominous, pulsating light. The rebels flinched, their weapons raised instinctively. Something was happening. But what? Was it a new weapon being activated? Or had they triggered some kind of defensive protocol? Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook violently, sending everyone off balance. The alien leader's form flickered, a strange distortion taking place around it. For a split second, it appeared to be two beings fused together, a chaos of alien energy clashing with a humanoid shape. A rift in the very fabric of space seemed to tear open before them, an opening into another dimension, or perhaps another plane of existence. The rebels' eyes widened in disbelief. What was this? And then, just as suddenly, the rift closed, leaving nothing but an eerie silence in its wake. The alien leader stood firm, unaffected. But now, more than ever, the rebels could sense it. There was something much more dangerous at play than they had ever imagined. This wasn't just about freeing humanity from alien oppression anymore. It was about surviving something much darker, something far beyond the understanding of anyone present. The stakes had just risen exponentially. The world they had known, the battle they had been fighting for years, had just become a far more complex and deadly game. Their fate, and the fate of humanity, now hinged on uncharted waters. What had they uncovered in this alien stronghold? What would it take to break the chains they had long fought to destroy? The answers were out there, but now, the rebels knew, nothing would ever be the same again. The silence after the rift closed was deafening. The rebels were frozen, their weapons still raised, unsure of whether they had just witnessed an attack or a warning. The air felt thick, charged with something far beyond anything they had encountered. Their hearts hammered in their chests, the adrenaline from the alien's words still coursing through their veins. The alien leader, standing tall before them, offered no explanation. It seemed almost amused, watching their confusion, as if it had expected this reaction all along. Then, as if a decision had been made, the alien's figure began to pulse with an eerie glow, its eyes narrowing. The leader lifted one hand slowly, a gesture that seemed deceptively calm. The rebels instinctively tensed, but it wasn't an attack. It was something much more subtle. The alien was manipulating the very environment around them. The walls shifted, the ground beneath their feet rumbled once more, but this time the entire structure began to twist as though the building itself was alive. The lights flickered, and shadows seemed to dance unnaturally, flickering between the cracks of reality and illusion. The general's instincts kicked in. They shouted for their team to hold steady, to brace for whatever was coming next. The rebels, still shaken, didn't know what was real anymore. The aliens' powers had already shattered their understanding of the world. But there was no turning back. They had come too far to retreat now. The fight was on, and they would either win or die trying. With a sudden surge of force, the alien leader's glowing hand flared, and the floor beneath them shattered into pieces, sending the rebels scattering in every direction. The general found themselves tumbling across the ground, their vision blurred as the world twisted and spun around them. The alien was fast, its movements smooth and predatory, as it effortlessly used the environment to its advantage. The rebels were struggling to regroup, finding their footing amidst the chaos. For a moment, it seemed as if the alien was toying with them, its power overwhelming. It mocked them with every word, every movement. You thought you could break the chains? You thought you could defeat an empire that spans the stars. You are nothing more than an insignificant threat. And now, you will see what happens when you challenge true power. The general clenched their fists, refusing to let those words break them. They had been fighting for too long. They rallied the rebels, calling out orders, trying to get everyone into formation despite the collapsing surroundings. There had to be a way to fight back. There had to be a chance for victory. In the midst of the destruction, the general's eyes landed on something they hadn't noticed before, a strange, glowing symbol embedded in the wall across the room. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost familiar. The general's pulse quickened. Could it be? Had they stumbled upon the weapon they had been sent to find? The one that was supposed to turn the tide of this war. Without thinking, they sprinted toward it, the alien leader's gaze following them. The tension in the air grew heavier with each step. The alien leader sneered, knowing full well what the general had seen. Do you think you can control it? Do you think this will change anything? But the general wasn't listening anymore. They didn't have time for doubts, for fear. They reached the wall, their fingers brushing against the glowing symbol. It was warm to the touch, radiating a power that surged through their fingertips. With one decisive motion, the general pressed their hand into the symbol, and the entire structure seemed to shake. The world around them seemed to flicker, the alien leader's form warping in and out of focus. A low, rumbling hum filled the air, and suddenly, the general was struck by a vision, flashes of history, of countless battles fought, countless civilizations fallen. They saw the alien forces as they had once been, their power stretching across galaxies, their control absolute. But in the midst of it all, they also saw something else, a pattern, a flaw. The aliens, despite their strength, had a weakness. And this weapon, this hidden force, had the potential to exploit it. The vision faded, and the general's mind cleared. They looked at the symbol once more, and with renewed determination, they activated it. A bright flash of light exploded from the wall, cascading outward in all directions. The alien leader let out a howl, recoiling as the light struck its body. The air vibrated with raw energy, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause, suspended in the balance. The alien leader staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief. It tried to resist, to fight against the power that was now coursing through the structure. The weapon, whatever it was, had been activated, and its effects were immediate. The alien's body began to flicker, shifting and distorting as though reality itself couldn't hold it together. The general didn't know how it worked, but they didn't need to. They knew this was their only chance. They pressed forward, moving toward the alien. Just when it seemed like they had won, when victory was within reach, the alien leader managed one final, desperate attempt to retaliate. It raised its hand high, and the room pulsed with an enormous burst of energy. The light from the weapon flickered, threatening to die out. But the general wasn't finished. With every ounce of strength they had left, they leapt forward, using the last of their energy to strike at the alien leader's core. Their fist connected with the alien's chest, and with a shuddering crack, the power that had once held it together shattered. The alien's form crumpled, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the room fell silent. The weapon's light began to fade, and the oppressive weight in the air lifted. The general collapsed to their knees, exhausted but victorious. The remaining rebels cautiously approached, unsure of what to say, unsure of what had just happened. They had done it. They had broken the chains. But the cost had been high. As the dust settled, the general glanced around at their team, their hearts still racing. They had won this battle, but the war, it was far from over. The true extent of the aliens' empire was still unknown. The general knew one thing for certain: humanity had broken free, but there was still countless challenges ahead. They had won a battle today, but the fight for the future had only just begun. And as they stood there, looking at the wreckage of the alien stronghold, they knew that no matter what came next, humanity had proven something important. Against all odds, they had fought back, and they weren't going to stop until they had their freedom. But as they turned to leave the chamber, the general couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the shadows. A final, unexpected twist. Something or someone that they had yet to face. And that thought would haunt them long after the dust had settled. The general stood amidst the wreckage, their body trembling with exhaustion. The final blow had been struck, but the weight of the battle still hung heavily in the air. The alien leader's body lay in a twisted heap on the floor, the once immense power that had radiated from it now snuffed out like a candle in the wind. The rebels, who had been thrown into chaos mere moments ago, were beginning to gather themselves, slowly but surely. The silence in the chamber was palpable, a stark contrast to the deafening sound of destruction that had preceded it. The general wiped the sweat from their brow, their eyes scanning the fallen structure. It wasn't just the alien leader that had been defeated, but the illusion of invincibility that had loomed over them all. For so long, humanity had been shackled by the alien empire. The hope that had once seemed distant now surged within them, stronger than ever before. But as they breathed in the air, now clearer, fresher, they couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still missing. It was the same feeling they'd had moments before the final blow. As the rebels regrouped, exchanging glances and words of encouragement, the general's eyes darted to the darkened corner of the room, where the shadows seemed to linger unnaturally. Something was watching them. "General," one of the rebels spoke hesitantly, their voice breaking through the tension. We did it. We've won. But what about the rest of the empire? What comes next?" The question hung in the air, echoing through the wreckage. There was a finality to the moment that left a bitter taste in the general's mouth. Victory, yes, but at what cost? What would their world look like now? What would the galaxy look like? The alien forces were vast, their reach stretched far and wide. This victory was significant, but the war wasn't over. It couldn't be. "We keep fighting," the general responded, their voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "This is just the beginning." But even as they said the words, doubt crept in. The alien empire had been a shadow cast over their lives for so long, its grip on humanity so absolute that the thought of truly breaking free seemed almost impossible. Even now, as they stood victorious, the war was far from over. The general knew this battle wasn't the end. There was more to fight for, more to discover, and they would need every ounce of strength to continue. As they looked around the chamber, at their team, they realized just how much had changed. They had all come so far from the days of being mere rebels fighting against an oppressive alien force to this moment where they had turned the tide. Each of them had grown, each had made sacrifices. And it wasn't just the alien leader that had been defeated, it was the mentality that had kept them in chains for so long. They had done the impossible. They had broken free. But breaking the chains was just the first step. The general motioned for the team to gather around, their voice low but filled with purpose. "We've got a long road ahead of us. We may have defeated one leader, but there are many more out there. We've uncovered a fraction of the Empire's power, but it's enough. It's more than enough." One of the rebels, still nursing wounds from the chaos, asked quietly, "The thing you activated, is it safe?" The general looked back at the symbol they had pressed into the wall. The energy it had released still lingered in the air, its pulse faint but undeniable. They could feel it, a deep hum that resonated within them. The weapon had worked, but its true purpose was still a mystery. Could it be controlled, or had it merely been a tool of destruction? That weapon, the general began, their mind racing with possibilities. It wasn't just a weapon. It's a message. A signal, maybe. Something older than the Empire itself. As they spoke, the rebels exchanged uneasy glances. The room felt colder now, the shadows deeper, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. "What do we do now?" one of the rebels asked, uncertainty creeping into their voice. The general paused, thinking deeply. "We need answers. And to get them, we have to go deeper, to the heart of the Empire. The one thing we know for sure is that we can't stop here." The team looked at each other, their resolve hardening once more. They had fought for freedom, for their homes, for their families. They had broken the chains. But now, the true fight for humanity's future had begun. The Empire was vast, and its true leaders remained hidden, lurking in the shadows. The general couldn't help but wonder, what else did the Empire hide? What other truths had they buried beneath their iron rule? With a final glance at the fallen alien leader, the general turned toward the door. The rebels followed, stepping carefully over the debris, their minds clouded with thoughts of the unknown. The future stretched before them, full of uncertainty and peril. But one thing was clear: they were no longer the prisoners they had once been. The chains had been broken, but the battle for humanity's future was far from over. As they stepped out into the hallway, a strange sense of anticipation filled the air. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, the vibrations in the ground growing stronger with each passing second. It was as if the very planet itself was waking up. The general's instincts flared something was coming. But what? The answer was just beyond reach. The rebels, now fully alert, began to move cautiously down the corridor. Their weapons were at the ready, but even the bravest among them felt a lingering unease. Something had changed, something far beyond their understanding. The alien empire had crumbled in one battle, but that didn't mean the war was over. Not yet. Ahead, the dim light from their flashlights illuminated a door, one they had not noticed before. The general paused, instinctively drawing in a breath. They had passed through these halls countless times, but this door, this one, was different. "Do you feel that?" one of the rebels whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing hum in the air. The general nodded. "I do." They moved toward the door cautiously, the air thickening with tension. With a deep breath, the general reached for the handle, bracing for whatever might lie beyond. When the door creaked open, it revealed a room unlike any they had seen before. It was empty, save for a single pedestal in the center. On it rested a strange glowing orb. The orb seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as though it was waiting for something. The general hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, feeling a strange pull, something they couldn't explain. The orb hummed louder as they approached. Then, just as their fingers brushed against it, the lights flickered. The hum stopped, and the room went black. The general spun around, heart pounding. The rebels scattered, trying to find their bearings in the sudden darkness. And then, a voice. "This is only the beginning." A chill ran down the general's spine. The rebellion had only just begun to realize the true extent of what they were up against. Whatever this orb was, it was far more than they had anticipated. And the fight for their freedom had just entered a new chapter 1 that would test everything they had fought for. As the tension hung in the air, they all knew one thing for certain. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it. And the chains that once bound them had been shattered forever.